So I want to talk a little bit about what the New York Times admitted to. And this is the thing. When the New York Times finally admits something that they have been denying for a long time, it's getting to the point. We had a caller earlier, I think it was Pastor Jeff, who said people are starting to wake up to this and they're realizing that they've been lied to. And every time they tell you that something isn't true and it's a conspiracy theory, and then eventually, months down the line, they admit that it was correct, people register that. Maybe not everybody. There's always going to be cultists who will never accept reality. That's always going to be the case. But other people who are not like that, that registers with them. They remember when they were told certain things were not true, and that people like me who told you those things based on scientific research, not just my opinion, when they attack people like me and then they finally admit that I'm right, that registers with people. People start to realize that they've been manipulated here. So the New York Times has admitted something that we have been talking about for a long time here, and it's all based on actual scientific research and the medical data. I've told you before, I am not going to give you my opinion about this stuff without specifically telling you, this is my opinion, I don't have any evidence for it. And I've done that a couple of times. Have I not? Josh, I have. But I always tell you when it's my opinion. I tell you when something is fact, or at least has been presented as official data, and then I will tell you something when it's my opinion. That's what I think makes this show so different from most others. I don't conflate those two. And I trust my audience to listen with both ears. Some of you disappoint me sometimes, but I trust my audience to listen with both ears and pick up those markers when I give them to you. The New York Times has finally accepted that individuals unvaccinated against COVID who previously contracted the virus had lower rates of infection and hospitalization than those protected by vaccines alone. Now, why is this important? Because, Casey, you've told us this for a long time. I know. And yes, the CDC finally admitted it after a huge push at the end of last year to tell you all that that wasn't true and that vaccines provided more protection than natural immunity. None of that was accurate. Now, what's interesting about this, and we kind of highlighted this back then too, is that I was staring at several studies, I think half a dozen studies, that showed natural immunity was way better than the vaccinations were, okay? And then auto-magically, at the end of last year, the CDC comes out right before the holidays and says, no, that's not true. And the very little bit of data that they released was picked apart by the scientific community as being absolute trash. And then all of a sudden, the CDC goes, yeah, everybody was right. Natural immunity is better. Provides a lot better protection than the vaccines alone. So now the New York Times, who devoted massive quantities of their publication's real estate to attacking people who said that very same thing for the past year or so, is now admitting that all of their previous reporting was wrong and that all of the people they attacked on this particular issue were right. That's not a small thing. Now, are they presenting it that way? You were right, we were wrong? No, of course not. They're pretending that this is new information and that they've always gone with the science. But they are admitting, finally, that they were wrong and the people they attacked as conspiracy theorists were the ones that were correct. And those conspiracy theorists didn't just make it up. There were very big studies done on this. Many of them backed by very, very scientifically advanced national governments, particularly in Israel. It was never one of those things that was some podcaster said it, or something like that. It was never anecdotal. It was always concrete when this was said. And so the fact that the New York Times is now admitting it, I'm sorry, but that is a big deal. And there are people out there who read the New York Times who are neutral politically, or maybe they're not tribalists at the very least, who read the New York Times every single day, who will remember all of the times that the New York Times attacked people who said natural immunity was better than the vaccines. And they will remember all of those articles and all of those because they will have used them against their friends. They will have used them against their family. They will have used them against people that they were arguing with online. They will link to those New York Times articles ad nauseum. And now, the same publication that they were citing back then is now saying that they were wrong and the conspiracy theorists were correct. There was another conspiracy that was out there. And I don't know how many of you have remembered this, but there has been some contention about women's menstrual cycles with the vaccines. And we were told that it was a conspiracy theory that the vaccines mess with women's menstrual cycles. Now, it does various things to different women. Sometimes it takes them off of their normal schedule. Sometimes it increases flow. Sometimes it reduces flow. Sometimes it puts people into early menopause. Sometimes it brings people who have been in menopause for years out of menopause. There's all sorts of research on this. But in the United States, that has always been presented as a conspiracy theory by the United States government and the American media. Well, isn't this interesting? The U.S. National Institutes of Health did a study, and they found that the COVID-19 vaccines lengthened women's menstrual cycles, Josh. A month ago, they were attacking people who said this because there was a story that blew up about menstrual cycles around when I was out of town. And we didn't get a chance to really talk about it on this show. I was posting about it on social media, but it blew up. And what was the government doing? What were the Fauciites in our government doing? Telling you there's no evidence that that happens whatsoever. It's a conspiracy theory. And now we have the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, Josh, where the Fauciites all sprang forth from. Now telling you, yeah, the COVID-19 vaccines do, in fact, lengthen women's menstrual cycles. Yeah, don't think for a second that people aren't picking up on this. A study published in January edition of the Obstetrics and Gynecology compared menstrual cycle lengths between women vaccinated and unvaccinated against COVID-19. For vaccinated individuals, data was from 3 consecutive cycles before vaccination, from 3 more consecutive cycles, including the cycle or cycles in which the vaccination took place. For unvaccinated individuals, data was collected for 6 consecutive cycles, according to the summary of the study. This is not a small study. There are 3,959 individuals who were analyzed. 2,403 of them were vaccinated, with most receiving either a Pfizer or Moderna jab, and 1,556 were unvaccinated. So this is not a small study. This is a decent sample size, okay? On average, the first vaccination dose was associated with a 0.71-day cycle increase in cycle length and cycle dose, with a 0.91-day increase. So the NIH finally studied something and said, yeah, all the conspiracy theorists that we've been attacking for these past year or so, they were all telling the truth. And once again, we were wrong. How many times do we have to point out that Fauci and the NIH and the CDC and the WHO and your local health officials were wrong about something? How many times do we have to point this out? A lot? Apparently, Josh, a lot. I wasn't exaggerating. When I came back from vacation, there were 50. So much so, I created a special show prep folder. I made it a shareable folder, and I just linked to the folder in the Daily Show Prep because I didn't want to post them all. And what did I do when I came back, Josh? I spent an hour going over a good chunk. I think I got through half of them. Maybe half. There were 50 stories of Casey was right and Fauci was wrong. Casey was right. Dr. Einters was wrong. Casey was right. Dr. Fox was wrong. Casey was right. The chinless Holcomb was wrong. How many times does this have to happen before even the most stingy, loyal tribalist out there backs up and says, okay, if nothing else, I'm at least going to listen when somebody says something about this instead of just taking what comes out of their mouths as gospel. Because that's what it is. It's gospel. You're a part of a cult. The people who still buy into everything that they say The people are still wearing two cloth masks out and about, even though everybody now admits they don't work. You're the same people who would join a cult and hand your spouse and your children over to the cult leader to diddle and have their way with in the middle of the night, and you would be okay with it because at least it was the Spirit of God that was doing it and not the actual cult leader himself. That's who you are, whether you want to admit it or not. You're the type of people like this doctor allegedly over at St. Joseph County Regional Medical Center who then threatened to pull oxygen off of a COVID patient because she wanted ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine instead of remdesivir and a ventilator. So you could show her what, air quote, show her what it was like to suffocate to death, which was going to happen to her if she left the hospital and tried to get ivermectin. Guess what? She's fully recovered. She got treatment from a doctor in Michigan who's now running for Congress. Dr. O'Donnell, I believe is her name. And she recovered just fine. That's who you are. I mean, this is a sad state of affairs. And we got to a point in this country now where virtually nobody can trust their doctor. I can trust mine. I know that many of you have good doctors that you can trust. But we're at a point now where public health officials, which used to be beyond reproach, can't trust them now. People who are always anti-big pharma suddenly are shrills, both of them, for big pharma. It's just, I don't know, it's bizarre. Folks, a month ago, it was a conspiracy theory that the government was attacking. Now they're admitting it's true.